So, welcome everyone. This is the May 24th, 2017 meeting of the Nottingham Planning Board. I'm going to just go around the table here and let members introduce themselves. Buzz, if you would start.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Teresa Bascom.
Anthony Dumas from the Select Board.
Edward Veal. Dirk Grotenhuis.
Susan Mooney.
Gary Anderson.
Joe Clough.
And Paul Colby, Code Administrator.
We have a public meeting that we're going to start out with this evening regarding the impact fees. So we've have a planner, Bruce Mayberry, who will be talking to us about some reports that have been done, some updates for 2016 for the public schools impact fees, the recreation facilities impact fees, and the fire department impact fees. And these are impact fees that are assessed on new development, new housing development, as they come into the planning board. And we are required to make sure that we have updated values on those every 5 years. And so the town has hired Mr. Mayberry to reassess those, and we've got a report now in, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Mayberry, if you would come forward and just give us kind of an update since we last met.
For your records, Bruce Mayberry, BCM Planning LLC from Yarmouth, Maine. Let me see, there's quite a few documents that I just wanted to go over and make sure you have the 3 impact fee reports. We pretty much finished off, the school, since we last met, there was discussion about a revised plan for a kindergarten building. We worked that into the revised report, which was done finished in December. So December 28th is the most recent one. I will say, just having you printed those, there's a pagination error in the fire and school. You'll see it starts on page 2 and it should start on page 1. I fixed that, I'll send you new ones. I think the rec one is okay. So the school impact fee was revised according to that, the new school district information about bearing on a plan for a separate kindergarten building and the costs of that. So that was factored into those school impact fee options. There was a fire, there was a slight change to that. It was pointed out to me that the ambulance is paid for from a separate fund, and so that was taken out of the equipment inventory. There was some table numbering errors, and those were corrected in that report. The latest one is dated 12/15/2016. Recreation impact fee, that one's the most recent, dated January 27, 2017. When we met to talk about recreation, the very first draft was based on the 10-year rec plan, which I think the board had a consensus that was too ambitious a plan for basing the impact fee on it. I think it was over a $7 million investment, and everybody felt that was probably unrealistic, even on a long-term horizon. So the recommendation is to go back to the Marston plan, try to use that as the basis for new recreation facility investments. So in doing that, I did incorporate some recovery, some averaging of the costs of existing facilities. There aren't too many, but they do have some capital value. And so your recreation fee under the revision comes out to around $500 for a single family unit. In New Hampshire, the ones I've worked on most recently are probably on the order of $900 to $1,000, but these are mostly larger municipalities with bigger inventories of capital facilities. So it's not unusual if you prefer a fairly small inventory of capital facilities at this time, for that to be somewhat lower. There was also questions submitted that we also did an ordinance review, I should mention that, in September. So there's a review of the ordinance with some recommendations there. It was also requested think it was Chris Sterndale, as well as some others, talked about, should we put fire equipment inside a recreation impact fee, in that a lot of that could be replacement of existing equipment. So I put that at some length in a letter addressed to Joanna that was dated March 31st. That talks at some length about my interpretation of how that relates back to the statute, that relates back to the capital needs of the fire department. Basically, we're talking about, over time, fire departments really have to replace their equipment on a certain replacement schedule, or the firefighting capability will begin to deteriorate. And everybody benefits from the fire equipment, whether it's new development or existing development. And so the technique is usually to average in the overall capital cost of your major apparatus as part of what we would call the capital facility for the fire department, in that in a lot of cases the cost of the equipment is more than the cost of the building that you put it in. It's the major instrumentality for fighting fires, and I think that most of the impact fees I've seen out there include one I just did for Manchester, includes the value of the capital equipment. It's a pro rata share, assuming that you're always going to have to keep your investment out at a certain amount per capita. So it's not that we're saying new development, you pay for a new fire truck. You're saying new development, here's a proportionate share per capita of our total facility investment, and that's what we want to recover from you. My feeling is one way to look at impact fees, if you're looking at it from sort of a taxpayer point of view, one might say, if you're looking at new development, which is something not yet built in town, and ask the question, how much has this development contributed toward capital improvements that are needed to serve it? The answer is zero. Eventually, they will pay something based on how much you spend the budget for future capital facilities. But at the point where they enter the town, there's really, they have not made any tax contribution. So part of the job of the impact fee is try to rectify that, is try to, over time, doing is reimbursing the existing taxpayer for what they might have invested in advance to help serve what new development will end up consuming. So that's a fancy way of saying it, but I think the fire equipment is fine within there. Then the final question that I got was, I think it was Charlene Anderson brought up the question of, especially for recreation, question of, there hasn't been a lot of new investment in recreation. The past investments might be fairly minimal. So what happens if we just look at new facilities yet to be built, let's say, as the basis for the impact fees? So yet another memo on that one. Just on fee alternatives, and that was May 3rd. I can go over that one briefly with you. I think what I tried to do is look just recreation. So the question there was basically, if you don't attribute any value to existing rec facilities and start from scratch and say the only facility investment we're going to recover is a pro rata share of the Marston investment, that's $720,000. And if you assume that would serve a 2030 to 2035 population, let's say long term, that would bring the fee down to around $306 for a single family unit. There's a little chart in that May 3rd memo that shows that, as opposed to $500 if you allocate a little bit for recovery of your existing investment in the other facilities. So something of a difference. I think one thing to think about in terms of the fee amounts is that there's often sort of a remorse later on when time goes by, you get new development, and you look back and say, gee, we didn't get any money. There's not enough to do anything here with, and so that's one consideration. But the major consideration, either alternative would be proportionate depending on how much of the facility investment that you want to recover. So that's a possibility. So then the question is, what if we take that same approach and we apply it to the fire department? So if you take out the apparatus and assume no equipment value, that would bring your $800 fee down to $344. for a single-family unit, because as I said, the cost of the equipment is probably a higher amount per housing unit than the cost of the building. And that brings, that's a 57% reduction in the fee that you would associate that with. Now, if you go back to the idea that we shouldn't recover fees for things that already exist, and you took away both the equipment and the fire station, you'd have zero, because there aren't any, new facilities. The whole idea with the fire, I'm exaggerating there, because the fire station was built, according to the first method we did way back, it was built for a certain lifespan, a projected lifespan. And so even though it's now an existing facility, the statute allows you to recover what they call recoupment, a proportion of the facilities that you invested in, to the extent that will serve new development. So we apportioned a certain part of that building cost to the future. So when we did that original fee, that was part of the equation. So even though it exists, yes, it has some capacity to absorb future development, particularly if there's no other fire station being proposed. I think it was built so that you could put an addition on it at some point if you needed to do that. So, I mean, that's just taking that logic another step. Next one was the school impact fee. You have an existing school. It has some capacity, not a lot, but the proposal to add a separate building for kindergarten would open up more space for kindergarten, but by moving the kindergarten out, you get more space for grades 1 through 8 as well. So your capacity there would be available. So in the school impact fee, we had a range in there of, depending on what you ascribe to cost per square foot, between $3,363 per single family unit up to $4,235 at a maximum. I think we were looking at the lower figure, but if we said, well, all we're going to do is build a kindergarten as a future facility, I tried to compute that out as best I could, and I came out with about $216 per single family home, because you've only got 0.027 kindergarten pupils per single family home, a certain capacity. So if you're focusing only on that grade, you're recovering just only about 8% of the facility value that's attributable to a typical enrollment driven by a single family home. So I mean, I just did those to kind of illustrate if we take the approach that we're only going to deal with new things and we're going to forget about existing things, then obviously the fees go way down. But I think there's a tendency of looking at new development means new facilities. Not always so. New development will consume part of the facilities we build to provide for their needs. And so that's the whole theory on the impact fee recoupment portion. So that's just part of the practical I've approached them. If you get to a point where you still have your constraint for capacity, you end up having being overloaded beyond capacity, and the district still doesn't pass anything, a bond or do a new kindergarten or expansion, and that continues for a period of years, then that might be a reason to rescind the school impact fee at some point if you get to a breaking point. I don't think you're there yet, because as I remember, the enrollment had not expanded as housing growth had gone along. There was some flattening there. So you did have a little bit of reserve capacity, and if you did the kindergarten building, you would still have some reserve capacity in the K through 8 system. So anyway, if you look at all those things together, if you took just new facilities, fire building only, no capital equipment, and recreation without any past investment, you'd be at about $885 per single family unit for all three fees combined, compared to about $46.63 at the low end of the fee per single family unit in the original report methodologies that we had, not the original ones, but the updated ones, I should say. So that's where we're at. I think the most of the discussion that was left open, I think, was on the recreation, because that was when I kind of had to go back and redo the report. So in the rec fee report, you've got two options. You still have the original one with the 10-year plan, just I've already done the work, so I might as well show it there for comparison. And then, but with the preferred method being based on the Marston plan, plus some recovery of existing facilities. I think the other two, I think I had made the corrections that we talked about at the other meeting, so I took the draft watermark off those two. I just usually leave the draft watermark in there, just so nobody thinks it's an adopted document at some point, and I can remove that when you're ready and just send you a new one. So that's my perspective. So I'll try to go back and answer the questions that came up, and I can't remember when we last met. It must have been September, I'm guessing, or September, October, yeah, December, okay. So, yeah, I'll be glad to try to answer any other questions. The study is all paid up. I billed you prematurely at the second meeting, which is now. so that's why I'm here to follow up.
Okay.
So whatever I can answer, I'll try to do.
Thank you. I do want to ask if, I know the school board has a member here, and fire department has a member here. If you guys have any comments or questions, or if you had a chance to review the most recent ones, feel free to ask or join in discussion. Is there any questions from the board?
I'm curious, I gathered from what you were saying that the impact would be put towards facilities that already exist.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that, like, for the school, like the generator that they need and stuff like that, could fees go towards that? Because we were under the impression that if it was something, fees couldn't be put toward it. But from what you're saying now, it sounds like we can.
Well, I wouldn't just replace something if it's out of repair.
No, if they don't have
If you
a
don't
backup
have something.
generator.
Right now, your impact fee, it's in a recoupment mode, let's say, because you still have a little bit of capacity left. So you're recovering based on the value of the facility. So in that case, I think you could spend it on something like that, and some other capital improvement. But if you get to the point where, gee, you don't have enough capacity for the students you have, now you're in a deficiency situation, and you should be holding that money until such time as you do an expansion of some type.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't encourage the school to spend the money that's been collected already, because if we pass something, they can use the funds that were collected already?
Well, right now, you could use it for pretty much any school improvement project. My concern is if a few years down the road, if capacity tightens up, no kindergarten building is built, now you're under capacity. You don't have enough space
Right.
for an expansion, to serve the students at the you want for floor area. So now you're in deficiency. So in that case, you shouldn't be spending it on things that fix up what's there, or making those, repairing that deficiency in space, which would mean some kind of expansion. So you could hold the money for 6 years and see if there is a capacity improvement project that you could put it toward. But if you're pressed for time and you have fees building up and they're getting to be 6 years old,
Right.
I think at this point you could reinvest it in the existing facility. I mean, that's my opinion.
So anything that's would be coming due, we could encourage them to put towards something like the backup generator.
Yeah. you could
But
do that.
anything that still has some time left to it, hang on to it for the upcoming builds that we all
I
know.
would do that, just to keep it. I mean, this is my theory about how you can use the impact fees. The statute doesn't really give you the do's and don'ts. It gives you the general. But I think that Yeah, I think the difficulty is if you had plenty of capacity, there's some school districts I've worked in, the school is, enrollment is declined, they're only at 50-60% of their capacity. And all of that is available to new development. So you have the luxury of this extra space, you've already built it and paid for it, and now you can recover something from new development to help offset that advanced investment, let's say. So it's when things get tight, that's where it gets a little harder to answer the question of what to do with it.
One of the things that we've kind of come up against is that term of the 6-year usage. So I know somebody else wanted to say something as well.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I did have a question. I thought we received, board chair, I thought we received advice that we couldn't use those funds, impact fees that we currently have, the current facility. They really had to be tied to new initiatives based on.
That memo came from your lawyer. We have it in the office. That was from the school board's lawyer.
I think because the statute isn't perhaps as clear, but are you folks, Mr. Mayberry, the expert, is saying that?
Well, I'm not here to give you legal advice, so I would always defer to the legal advice on what's lawful or not lawful. But in terms of what would be consistent with what I think the statute says, it does say you can recoup the cost of you can base the fee on recoupment, which is recovery of. Then what do you spend it on? It's a little less clear on what you can, if you're recovering something. That would almost assume that you can spend it on other things because you're now recovering it. If you had debt service, you'd put it toward debt service as a priority. That would keep it aligned. But if you have a surplus of facilities, you've paid off your debt. Now new development is reimbursing you for what you spent. Where can the money go? It can't go to the general fund, we know that. So it would have to be, my logic is you'd have to reinvest it in the existing facility as your method of recoupment. But again, if there are other priorities, if you had someone designing a new building, a new kindergarten building, that would be an eligible capital improvement because that's a step toward expansion or construction, doing site work, anything that would be the stage of a construction.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear that anything to add capacity, any new investment to add capacity was clearly covered.
Yeah, I agree.
It sounds that this might be one of those grayer areas that, maybe Jackie should circle back with the attorney and see if that's something that the school board would be interested in, because, there is additional impacts that happen over the course of the life of the building that, impacts from more students coming in, so.
I think the problem is, the statute is fairly short, and being short, it doesn't give you that much explanation. I would say without the phrase that you can, that there's recoupment is allowed, there wouldn't be any question. You couldn't do that. You'd have to, you couldn't pay debt service on the existing facility if you couldn't do recoupment. So that's my analogy too. If you have, let's say you can do recoupment, you pay for the facility, has plenty of capacity, new development comes in, you charge them a pro rata share of what you've already invested in it, you get the money, now what can you do with it? Well, if you can't put it toward debt, what's the logical thing to do? I think it's to reinvest it in the same capital facility category, hopefully in something that should be an improvement rather than a repair. That's the way it works in my mind, is how you do that, because if the recoupment phrase weren't there, you really couldn't pay for anything you've already built, which would make any sense, because for decades, even before there were impact fees, we were doing things like water and sewer plants, where you'd build the plant, you invested X dollars per gallon per day to create enough capacity for the new units, new users to come online and start using their X gallons per day of the capacity. Even when those statutory mechanism, but the same.
existing facilities and infrastructures for which the new development, it's not created, that need's not created by the new development, can't be paid for by impact fees. So the fact that we don't have a generator, it's not because of the new development that we then need a new generator. So
No, but the wear and tear on the building
the wear and
Would
tear, potentially.
would be, so like the new windows, the new roof and all that kind of stuff. Sounds like it could be, that's on, 67421 in our books.
I was reading
Section A.
sorry.
That, I mean, I know, that's one way to read that, which, I think, what the New Hampshire Supreme Court has said. In its entirety, try to make it great if we all knew what that is. But I think that there is such a thing as, you know, there are upgrades, the need for which is created by development.
Right.
And so to me, that's a proportionate share of whatever capital improvement you have to make, whether they meant that or not, you know, in the phrase. That's how I've interpreted it, is that they just don't want you to go out and say, new generator, new development, you pay 100% of it. No, can't do that. Maybe some small proportionate share if it's part of the whole capital value. That was I think that might have been the idea, was not to have communities come up with a big smorgasbord of capital improvements and then build them all to the new houses that come in. But, so to keep it proportionate, that's how I, when you take different phrases out, that's been the big bugaboo, I think, since I've been working on these since 1992, is how do you put that into context with everything else?
And that
It's a valid
generator,
point.
I think that generator could also be looked at, and this is just my take on it, as, you know, with increased population, now maybe there might be a need for emergency shelter. And
Correct.
so by having that generator, that is a new need for the overall population. But
Right, because the town hall, this area can't hold the entire town anymore, so we need a second location. So in that respect,
Yeah.
the new developments could play a part in that. It could be argued that way.
When you think about it, too, think about what proportion of the total cost of a school is a generator. That's what you'd do. You'd be recovering, you know, money based on the total development cost of the school and spending the money on the generator, which is a tiny, infinitesimally small part of the total investment that has been made. So, I mean, just to put it in context anyway.
When you say improvements, for example, if the school was looking at solar, so that would be technically an improvement that would also allow them to serve, you know, the students, and the future students.
Could be, right.
So is that something that they,
I think it could be, and you know, the problem, the only problem I go back to is, and the cases where the full impact fee, say in a school, is having enough space for students to be in an overcrowded situation. So you adopt a standard, certain amount of square footage per pupil is the capacity which you'd like to maintain. Time goes on, school gets crowded. Now you only got 3/4 of the space you should have. Now you are essentially substandard. Now you take money from new development based on that, and you spend it on solar or something else. Then I think there's a potential conflict there. So it's the thing where you pick out different improvements that would be okay at different points in time, but I wouldn't base the impact fee. In other words, I wouldn't compute the cost of a solar array and then divide it coming into town. That wouldn't be fair, because you have to proportion the whole across all of the beneficiaries. So it's problematic. And when you get down to these points where if you get to the point where you really need to argue about whether it's, I think we all thought years ago when we did the first school impact fee that some bond issue would go forward for the school within some period of time. That would be an expansion, was the original plan. So when that didn't happen, that does raise, to the available space, and nothing, nothing else happens to expand it.
Yeah, I think the existing school now is, it's not at the precipice, but it's close. It is close, and, if we are in an upward trend in housing,
Yeah.
that could happen. So a lot of planning that's put in place, by the school board's projections and looking at
Right.
potentially what new projects they would need to expand, I think there's still the need.
Yeah, I think the other way you might look at it too is, periodically, when you're on the cusp of having to something improvement, I mean, you could just look back and say, well, where are we relative to capacity, and make a finding. Say, no, we're not, the maximum. We still have some excess capacity to use. That might be one rule of thumb you could do before deciding. Occasionally, there are towns do refunds, when that comes up. I think in your ordinance, I believe it's the owner of record. I can't remember how we originally
Yes.
wrote it. There was a Supreme Court opinion that came out a couple of years ago that affirmed that is an appropriate refund mechanism if your ordinance specifies it. So that was a relief to me to see that come out, because I've been pushing for that for a long time.
Jackie had a question.
I just wanted to let folks know that the school board does believe that they're supposed to be, when the student services are delivered in inadequate spaces, and during that time, the school board really went about looking at every nook and cranny to see what new space they could come up with creatively for low cost. So for instance, a closet had a window added, and now that's used for student services. The teacher's room was scaled down, offices were moved, another technology classroom, as technology is brought into each classroom, was turned into a classroom. So they've really taken a look, and I think have really carved out every nook and cranny for available space. The current situation is we do have a unified arts teacher, the health teacher, who's on a cart. So he does not have a classroom, even though he sees a full load of kids every day. And in fact, he's one of the only teachers that sees every student through their K through 8 career, at the school. If we wanted to bring world languages in, because we have had an increase in population. When the school was first opened, there were 482 students, and now we're up to 527 students, which is our all-time high enrollment. And also noticing that homeschools populations are going down. I think more homeschool children are coming into the school district as well, rather than being schooled at home. We've seen that trend too. So, say in the future we want to put in a world language, if the voters support that, there would not be a classroom for world languages. Because sometimes in the past, some grades only had 2 classes, now grades have 3 classes. And in fact, 2 of our grades are 3rd graders. There are 16 in 3 classes, 6th graders. So we are seeing some spikes there where certain class sizes are larger just because there happens to be a lot of those age kids in the town. So world languages were brought in, and should the school want to go to full-day kindergarten, there certainly is there's no space at this point to offer full-day kindergarten. There's currently 2 physical kindergarten classrooms, and they each have an AM and a PM session, so there's 4 kindergarten sessions. So to offer full-day kindergarten, you would need 3 to 4 classrooms, 4 if you wanted to keep the same enrollment levels. Plan, 3 to 4 more classrooms, trying to consider all sorts of different options, whether it's a modular or freestanding building. Additional costs because of sprinklers and things like that. So what we wanted to do, understanding that impact fees could be used, was to receive bids for some space utilization and space studies to understand what are our options. And we figured that would be a good first planning step. As we understand, it's allowable by the impact fees. I believe our first impact fees, 3 of them start expiring in 2008.
18,
18, excuse me, thank you.
3 of them next year. I have the whole list right here.
Yeah. So we have, 3 that go in,
The first one is March of next
March
year.
20th? Yeah.
March, July, and November of next year. Total at $12,669.
I think it would be interesting to know the original program space when the school was built, and now you've said that there's been a number of accommodations for different classes and programs, but it would be interesting to know now how's that changed. And, you know, obviously it's a result of added stat, or added students. You know, there's obviously clear cases for recoupment in that. When you're talking about putting a window in, you know, to add a classroom, you know, absolutely. So
I
those
don't
are,
speak out of turn here, but
Yeah.
I was looking back at the original classroom, view the capacity estimates from team design back on the original school itself. I mean, the gross capacity, this is when you just assume total efficiency, which doesn't exist. The maximum capacity was 565 to 615. That's if you're packing kids in ideally and classroom size is ideal. And usually you take 90 to 95% of that as a utilization factor, which brought it to 537 to 554. This is in the page 4 of the report. Now what happens often is, and I worked in, one of my first ones was in Deerfield, where we had the school impact fee way long ago. The school was built for 620 students, I think. And then I came back to do an update many years later, and the district said, oh no, that's not the capacity anymore, now it's 500. Well, what happened? Well, we want more space per student. Yes, it's desirable to have, but I mean, the impact fee standard was based on a certain minimum. And so that happens over time, is that, you know, the programs become enriched, we want more space per student, we want smaller class sizes. So that's happened, I mean, in all our lifetimes, we've probably seen that occur. But I did notice, you know, if you did do the kindergarten addition, you know, if you did do that, you'd have quite a bit of space, maybe not the most desirable amount of space, but you can go to school districts and see some of them, their standard is 150, 160 square feet per pupil, and in others it's 100. It depends on what you're willing to live with, or, you know, how much space per pupil gross. We're talking gross, not just classrooms. So again, I think you'd be home free if the kindergarten edition, you know, were to go forward, unless there's some big spike in enrollment. I don't think that's going to happen unless you know, we have a big influx of, you know, of families starting to move in again from out of state, and the demographics change, because the aging demographics are working against in-migration right now.
but I'm not sure that we can apply a 1-to-1 square footage of whatever, if there's a 3,500 square foot class addition that's going in for, you know, the preschool, that's gonna be 3,500 square feet
Right.
in the main school. So there's gotta be some, I don't think it's a 1-to-1.
Probably not, no, I know. I mean, I think if you went back, you know, just what I've seen over the years is whenever we go back and you hire a consultant to come in and say, what's your capacity now? It's almost always less than it used to be, even though it's the same physical space, because program standards and expectations change. So the same physical space that we based an impact fee on yesterday, you might find deficient in a study 10 years later, because now it's a whole new set of standards about
Changes all the time.
So, I know, so it's a moving target, and that's one of the problems with the fee. So you really want to base your fee, you know, if you can, on the minimum that you're willing to, you know, the minimum below which you'd really feel it would substandard, because most districts will wait until, you know, there's a crisis, you know, to do an expansion. So as long as you keep to the standards that are in the fee system, that's the important thing for the fee,
Yeah, and I mean,
even if it's not optimal, you know. for the
and it's not always up just to the district, you know.
Yeah.
The town has to vote the money. The district probably wants
after reading the alternative fee analysis was, would it be a possibility for us to use the structure for just the rec department, but the current fee structure for the fire department?
Sure. Sure. I mean, each one is freestanding method on its own. And so that's why I put them out as separate reports, because you may decide at one point to adopt one and not the other, or make changes. But certainly you could do that. You can make modifications to any of them, actually, if you had, as long as it's a proportionate modification. In other words, you could use this memo if you felt more comfortable with that approach for rec. You could adopt that one, referencing that one in your adoption. And I would also refer to the original report too, so the whole documentation isn't lost. But yeah, you can have different methods for different fees, certainly.
Okay.
In fact, for the other fees, it's not too popular. I haven't seen many places do it, but you can take the fee schedule that I came up with and say, well, that's the maximum. We'll discount it by X% to give it an extra margin of error, or whatever you want to say. I haven't seen many places do that, as I say, over time. Practical, they may seem to be. And eventually, if they get too low, they become almost a sort of a symbolic and annoying administrative responsibility, in my opinion, if you're collecting only a little bit of money, but you don't need to go out administrative and so forth. I mean, it seemed to me to come to a point where, maybe it's not worth it at a certain level to worry about having an impact fee for it.
I'd like to ask Mr. Mayberry, just on that point, where you said in your main letter on the school impact fee that the average cost of the fee for a home is $216, and you said it might not be worth administering at that low amount. What would be the breaking point?
Well, that's completely up to the town. I think in that, of course, if you did that, if you limited the impact fee of that $216 to single-family home, and you didn't build the kindergarten, then that money would have to be returned too, because that's the only thing that would be based on. So that's one approach. But I mean, the typical impact fee in New Hampshire for places that have, say, K through 8, maintain a K through 8 system on their own, is probably in the $3,000 to $4,000 range, based on the multipliers and so forth. So it's mostly a question of being able to maintain that capacity over time to justify the fee. But I don't think the amount is certainly not unreasonable for, the amount you carry. Now, of course, if you're a district that supports its own high school, then that goes up proportionately, obviously, because that's a greater expense, more square footage per pupil and so forth. But I can't really answer the question of where does the town want to be, below which it just isn't worth bothering, tracking these things and going through the assessment process. I worked with one town, I think, they just discounted everything by 25%, because to 25% of the fee amount that was calculated, just because of disagreements about whether there should be a fee at all. But it's get through property taxes and kind of reimburse yourself. So you're trying to keep up over time.
The town can adjust these fees annually.
I think the only requirement was to have a public hearing to do that, so everybody knows what you're doing, and you could adopt more, rescind, adjust, do your own internal adjustment. I can adjust them. I mean, I think it's just good to periodically, do what you did with technology, because things do change over time. Particularly, I mean, it's not so bad if you're doing a past investment, but it's very important if you're planning probably respond to that with some change, or either through a refund or a change in the fee system or some combination. I was always holding my breath. There were a couple towns that were doing impact fees for 20 years on facilities that they never built. They continue to collect them, and their attorneys found a way that they could spend it. But it always worried me. And then finally, facilities. But those always surprised me that nobody demanded a refund for those because they were entirely predicated on something fairly extensive being done. It just wasn't happening.
Any further questions from the board? Thank you very much.
I wish I could answer all the questions, but there's, the case law tells us a little bit, but not a whole lot. And fortunately, there hasn't been a lot of it, so I guess that's a good indication.
Any other follow-up questions? What's that, Chief? Jackie, you good?
I'll fix that pagination for you on those two reports.
Okay.
I never noticed it until the night of the meeting. I look out.
Of course.
Thank you.
One thing, sorry, just jumping at the end here, yeah, is, so if the average K-8 population per newer home is around 0.4 per house, and you know what the average new construction is valued at, is it like
The average new house being built right now,
for,
construction cost?
no, the average assessed value since like 2000, probably around the 350.
Wouldn't even go that high.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
So say it's 300,000.
yeah.
So per house per year is providing how much in taxes? Under 6,000, probably about $5,000 a year. Average cost to place a child in school is probably somewhere in the $10,000 range. So every two houses is almost a student paying about $10,000. So it's a wash. So you have to have two houses to,
Right, I think of course, the difference is, of course, the impact fee is related only to capital costs. The real cost of schools is mostly the operation
Right.
and staffing and so forth.
so when we talk about trying to not offset, but recoup some of the taxes that are the tax burden that's being placed on the current residents for future residents' needs. So obviously, we're paying for it now so that it's there. You know, that's, I think, some of the justification of
Sure.
these and the
You know,
continuation.
it gives you a little bit of an offset, but it doesn't obviously pay for, where the dollars are in terms of the educational programs. But it's something, it's really all that fees can do is that sort of part.
And I think when we talk about fire apparatus, it makes sense that is a capital cost. We have it in the capital improvement plan. It is a very significant cost, and Chief has been really good about getting that in advance, so we can usually try to budget for it in advance, and the town's been really good about trying to prepay.
Right.
So we're not taking out bonds for that kind of thing, and that obviously facilitate, helps the future residents as well, or any new resident that the past residents didn't bond that. They took it out of their own pockets and they paid it. So I think those that was interesting to see and a good piece of information.
But based on that, Ed, you gotta remember the current impact fee for the fire department, the select board has indicated all impact fees for the fire department will go to the bond payment until we pay off the fire station, which I think is what, 4 more years, Jay? How old is the station? 2007. Yeah, so it was, we got like another 4 years, so then I mean, right now in the fire department account as of today, there's $7,773, and that will be zeroed out in June, because we'll take that money out when we make our bond payment. So there's roughly about $210,000 in the school side. It's like Jackie said, there's about three that are due next year, about $12,000, what did I say, $600 something.
So how would that, how does that for application of the impact fee or for assessing?
Nope.
No.
So the balance is that for schools, it's over 200,000?
Yeah.
Because I think the project cost I had for the kindergarten was $475, and that was a rough estimate. So that would go a long way toward, that way you'd only have to raise half of it with taxes, so something to think about.
And that cost is if it's modulars, right? Not a
I
brick
think
and
so.
mortar.
Yeah, based on modular, what might be feasible and affordable.
And like you know, like was discussed, you know, some of those initial payments, or those initial impact fees could be used for some of the study work that leads to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's our plan, so
Yeah.
those
Yep.
dollars aren't lost, and help the overall effort of the plan.
May I ask Jackie a quick question?
You may.
Jackie, do you have a time frame for looking at all this, and maybe even a start date for digging a hole for building the new building?
We received yesterday the 2 bids from the vendors, and they haven't yet been presented to the full school board. Our next meeting is June 7th, I believe, early June. The board will be taking a look at those at that point and deciding, do we want to move forward on those vendors? I believe the time frame for the vendors to complete their work was over the summer to early fall. And that's understandable. But we've chosen the impact fees. The impact fees most likely are not going to fund the whole effort, or the whole project, so they're going to have to go most likely to the board decide to place it before the voters for funding.
Oh, good. So it is moving forward then? That's good.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We definitely do not want to lose, we understand that there's space concerns at the school, there's new programs, there's been growth, in order to meet those needs, we believe we need some more space. And the impact fees are really designed to help pay for space based on growth.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So your options now are to second, adopt a fee for each piece. So 3 separate fees. We'll schedule a public hearing, and then we'll listen to the public, and then you guys take your vote, and then we'll publish the new fee schedule. Have I missed anything?
No, I think if you just study, because each of those, I think in the school, at least it had options.
Right.
There's different schedules, and you'd want to take some, you know, obviously has to have the option that you felt most comfortable with, I think, and then also the smaller number or the slightly larger number at 500 versus, you're talking 500 versus 300 something. Between those two options. And the fire, I think, is pretty fixed. We came up with one amount. We took out the ambulance, and that's got everybody seems comfortable with the equipment. Well, these are.
We have his final reports. This is what
okay.
these are.
All right.
Yeah.
But you'll take the draft off, or?
I'll take the imprint out, fix the pages.
Right, yeah. So what we'll do is we'll come up in the next week, a spreadsheet that'll show the different options and what the fee schedule would be for each.
Perfect.
And then at our next meeting, we can discuss it.
Right.
That sounds good.
And I think when you do adopt it, it would be good to, it's always good to refer back to the report titles, just so there's a train of documentation file somewhere, so that you know, the public can try.
And Tony, just for to catch you up to speed, when someone comes in and I'm gonna assess them the fee, we collect it at the time of the CO. And when they get their permit, I hand them a handout that says, okay, your impact fee total is, currently right now, $4,220 goes towards school capital improvements, $667 goes towards fire department. And we'll just, you know, we adopt the rec, we'll add the rec on that, so.
Right.
So people know, number one, what it cost and where the money breakdown is.
That's a good practice. One of the most conscientious boards I've ever seen. You guys are really on top of it, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Dirk, do you want me to go get the rest of the forms for everybody?
No, it's fine.
No?
The other,
The other reports, because you didn't have rec. We didn't have a chance to print it off.
well, I have rec, but
We'll get them
hey,
afterwards.
we're not gonna, yeah, we can,
Oh, fire
if
had
you still
printed,
need it,
I'm
we
sorry.
can, we can wait to the end of the meeting.
Okay.
We're pretty close to that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, because the rest, all we have now are just some updates and minutes to vote on, so unless we want further discussion, but I think we really want to, my opinion would be to absorb this some more, get the spreadsheet that's a little bit more straightforward.
Right.
and then have a discussion at a future
Yep.
meeting,
Condensed.
condensed.
Yeah. we'll
Be the
condense
digest
it now.
version?
Right. Okay, well, with that, we're gonna move on to, the Board of Selectmen, staff board meeting updates. And normally what I do is just go around the room.
All set.
Robert?
Are you gonna talk roads?
Sure.
All right, then I'm all set.
All right, well, I can talk for a few minutes about roads. We talked about roads at the selectmen's meeting the other night. And I believe we're coming to the end of the current 5-year or 10-year plan on roads. So we're beginning the evaluation process for prioritizing for the next plan. Adding to our concerns is the fact that our road agent is retiring this fall. So we've begun getting a plan in place to hire, or to hire out for a new road agent. And part of our concerns with that is that our current agent obviously is a gentleman of high work ethic, goes above and beyond in a number of ways, and we're sort of concerned if we put those expectations on a new road agent, it might make the position more difficult to fill. So right now, we've just begun talking about the possibility of splitting up the position into an administrative and an operational role. We haven't made a decision on that yet, but that's one of the ideas that we're floating. As far as the roads themselves, overall, in terms of the representative number of miles that we have in town of roads, overall, our roads are in fairly good shape. That said, there are some areas of town that are of concern, and during our public hearing, we had quite a high, unexpectedly high turnout, people voicing their concerns. And there are a number of areas of town where the roads have become unintended throughways to get from point A to point B. For example, Cooper Hill Road, and I'm guilty of this. I cut that corner so I don't have to go through the intersection up in Northwood. Also, Ledge Farm and Poor Farm Road, that gets a lot of traffic now from all the new developments out there over the past 10 to 15 years, that were, those roads were just not, I want to say that they weren't engineered for, but my belief is that they weren't engineered at all. Those are just historical roads that have been, graded again and again. So we're going to look at all those roads that are in that situation and prioritize which ones we're going to hit first with respect to for improvement. And of course, we got to look at factors such as the number of users, people driving on it, and that impact, the impact on EMS services or first responders in general. There's drainage issues that we have to look at. The condition of the base, especially with a lot of these historical roads, they were never engineered in the first place. They're just matted down by virtue of a lot of horses, right? And then what the engineering options are in those situations when we come to address it. The best recent example of that is Lakeview. I mean, that road has not been touched since 1980-ish, and it was just a camp road when it began. And they're doing all the work now to re-engineer it, and it's quite a chore, but it's moving along nicely. But there were some engineering challenges in there that took some dealing with. So, what else can I tell you? That's pretty much the long and short of it. But we are, like I said, we are beginning the process of prioritizing our roads in need and laying out the plan for addressing them.
Is that, so, or the, like Lakeview, when you say engineer, do we use outside engineering on?
Yeah, we had
especially
to,
more complex
we had to
ones
bring in
around
an
the lake?
engineer for that, yeah. Because it was very twisty, turny, a lot of granite outcroppings, and then, in between them, there's, low ruts, and,
With the drainage to the lake.
and yeah, no drainage designed originally, so now drainage had to be instituted where there wasn't any before, so.
So it turned out to be a bigger project than we anticipated.
No, actually, the road agent kind of anticipated what it was gonna take. He's got a good eye for that. And he had all the right resources brought in at that time, so, I mean, his intent was to have that road done right, to keep it on par with other roads in town, so that it could have a lifespan of up to 50 years, if, you know, assuming it's done properly. So that was his intent. He didn't want to have to come back, you know, or the next road agent to have to come back in 10 years and look at doing repairs, replacing culverts, repaving sections. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted it done right from the get-go. So, and it looks like, so far from what we heard, it's going to end up coming out well.
So Lakeview's one of our town roads, not a private road for the lakes?
It's town road.
Yeah.
It was adopted from the state at some point. It was a state road
Oh, for Pawtuckaway?
off of that, I believe, and then we took it over
It
from
was
the
adopted before I was.
I think at
it was
the
like
town meeting, that's what was
16,
discussed.
17
Like,
years ago. Do you
we
remember when
bought
that
it
was
or took it from the state.
Was it,
and
what?
It's probably a bad
Yeah,
decision
that's,
without having them improve it first. But when I hear, you know, improved roads like Ledge Farm and things like that, I get a little nervous of, you know, improving doesn't always necessarily mean paving and widening and straightening, because I think some of the concern now is like throughways and speed that occurs.
Yeah, speed was mentioned
Especially-
as a concern on a lot of those.
Talk about opposite areas of the town too, Cooper Hill, obviously West Nottingham, Ledge Farm, complete other end, so that's taxing all of our emergency service personnel to either respond or police. So I think, you know, there's a caution there, perceived caution kind of thing where, you know, just paving and just makes it sometimes a little faster.
Yeah, that was one of the talking points the other night, is that, you know, paving will remediate a lot of the dust issues that people were complaining about, but it won't remediate the speed issue. That's something that has to be addressed through enforcement. So, and that's certainly something we'll pull in the police chief on and make him aware of those concerns. I don't have anything.
Well, then I can continue with that theme. We had a roads planning subcommittee meeting 2 weeks ago. Joe was there, Gary wasn't there,
Next time.
Teresa was there,
And Mike Russo?
and Mike Russo. Yep. I have my meeting notes, and they're gonna be formulated into actual minutes, so I'll get those done. We did go through touched on some of the topics, but really what we did was we ended up going through our master plan action items, which I think was very helpful, just to revisit some of those. And, you know, we're a few years past when that master plan was adopted. Some things have been implemented, some things aren't really valid anymore as action items. So I think the subcommittee is really gonna take that on and make sure that they're checked off, or if new action items need to be put on, that we're gonna be starting to look at that. And, you know, one of the things that wasn't involved in 2000, maybe Marston was there, but, so we're talking about some of the connections within the community that, maybe new connections, and how people would get from, you know, from the school to the downtown to Marston to, you know, we're talking about roads, but we're also talking about other modes of transportation, whether it be bicycles or pedestrians. The safety issues, we're looking at those items. Just to make sure that we're on par with where we need to be in our master plan. But also, there might be some other opportunities, signage and safety and some things that could be implemented really in a near future. You know, bicycle safety was one of them. You know, we could approach the state for 156 or 152 to put signage up. There is a program at DOT that has municipalities be able to purchase signs very inexpensively, and you know, kind of a, you know, that bicycles have space on the road, and it's a law, and so we can have some signage that could help a little bit. So those were just some of the things that we talked about, and we'll meet again on it.
Have you
Seventh?
scheduled?
I can't remember, I think we said June 7th?
Yeah.
Same night as school board?
Is it?
I might have the date wrong.
If it's the 7th.
Oh, that's what I'm recollecting.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday night.
I'll have to look at my
Yeah,
other.
it is the 7th, yeah.
Okay, then we probably won't do it then.
Okay.
Well, we'll set a new date, and I'll email out to the subcommittee.
Okay.
Just let us know so we can post it too.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is a Town and City magazine. Anyone want to read? You can. The highlighted topics in this issue is creating a culture of wellness at work, boosting your energy at work, the myth of employment at will, and managing your stress. All very important issues. If you want to read more, Town and City is here.
My turn.
Your turn.
My turn. Teresa, Joanna, and I went to the OEP conference over in Concord, and there was opportunity for 3 sessions that we could choose from. And the one that I thought was most beneficial, that both of the ladies went to, was a presentation on the new accessory dwelling units. And what struck me for Nottingham is that we need to take a look at these, because some people are putting in ADUs and they're using them for Airbnb. So if we put in, they cannot be rented out for less than a minimum of 2 or 3 months, then that would be fine. Another issue with them is that you could put in the regs that you are allowed an ADU as long as your septic and water can care for the additional.
That's already in there. That's already in our zoning ordinance. Yeah.
And then the third thing was, you can't restrict it to just 1 bedroom, but you can restrict it to no more than 2.
Right, which we did this year. Yeah.
So those are, there were other takeaways, but the Airbnb was the big one for me. Like, need to be able to keep them from being hotel units. Another thing, the Conservation Commission, thanks to Kristen Lamb and her energy and perseverance, and speaking with the BOS and the town office, who in turn spoke with our highway department, was able to secure turtle signage for places in town, not 156 and 152 or Route 4, where turtle crossings commonly occur. And so they went up like last Friday.
Yeah,
The town put
seen
them
them.
up, and I've already had people ask me if the Conservation Commission had done that, and I said yes, and I said, thank you. So that was a nice thing.
I can tell you, when Kristen actually went to mark the telephone pole for 101 Stevens Hill, she moved a Blandings
Yeah.
turtle, which
Yes.
is critically endangered in New Hampshire, so I think that's where they tried to go around with.
And they don't lay eggs until they're 16 years old. Then they have to survive all these road crossings, you know.
Who does them for the state roads? Because I saw a turtle that, last Sunday on 152.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, I couldn't move the turtle because it was pretty good size, and was concerned because cars, as we know,
They
go
do.
too fast there. So I'm flashing my lights, hoping it will slow it down, thinking there's a cop ahead and it's just a turtle, but I don't want to see them killed either. Who's the-
well, I stopped on 152 about 2 weeks ago and pulled off, and I just kind of went like this and picked up a little turtle and took care of it.
Yeah, a little
But
one I would have picked up.
Division
and a
6
big
in
one I would-
Durham of DOT.
Deer.
The little one I
That's what
picked up
controls
was
the
like
road.
12 years old, I learned. It's not a baby, it was quite mature. And the third thing I have is we had a special Conservation Commission meeting last Tuesday on the 16th to address issues that we were concerned about up at Shea Concrete, and we put together a letter.
Sam brought that in today.
Yeah, that had 5 items, and all I have is a copy of the draft, but we did move and approve that we send a letter that contains these 5 items. And I can read them out loud if the.
Technically, I would be very careful because
right,
we're
then I
not
will
having a
not.
public hearing on that. Yeah, the copy of the original copy is in the file for that project, and once they come back in, everybody will get a copy of it.
Okay,
So-
very good.
So that's gonna be brought up at a future meeting of the planning board.
Right.
And that letter went to DES.
That letter went to DES along with photos and minutes from a meeting that we had from the site walk.
Great.
I'm done.
Gary?
Just two items. I think I did last meeting mention that the 152 and Route 4 project is on the, it's really on the top of the list on transportation that was submitted to DOT now, I guess, 2 weeks ago. So it's now going to go through a process that'll would be basically looked at by DOT. I believe it goes through, don't quote me, I think the House, and then the governor's involved, and in the end, right around October, we'll know what's approved and what's not. I have no idea what that really looks like as far as the plan or anything. None of us would probably see it until these things get approved, and then the process would start to do the planning. So probably sometime in October, we'd hear about that. The other thing is Stratford Regional has their annual meeting coming up the 22nd of June, Thursday the 22nd, and that's basically going to be covering the main point, that several speakers on historic points in the state. So hoping to make that and be able to share what comes out of that one.
Great. Joe?
Just some more reflections on the meeting on Monday and what we're doing with the road subcommittee, maybe something we could do with the planning board. It was pretty interesting to hear the residents on Ledge Farm, Port Farm Road reflect on the fact that it was a development that may have increased some of the traffic, which is potentially doing more damage to the road. I'm curious if it's something we want to look at in both the action plan. Is there some strategy that we want to take to ensure that that isn't something that would happen again, maybe as a show of good faith to the residents that we're actually considering those types of things with future
Well,
developments?
what we did in the new subdivision regulations we approved right before you came on the board was that off-site improvement piece is really defined in there now.
To the extent that it could go broader than, and my next question would be, would we have an impact fee strategy for road improvement and maintenance for that area where a development would increase traffic and increase
Yeah, we could,
wear and
That's
tear?
part of the road committee's.
yeah, we can look at off-site mitigation impacts.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is the, with the traffic study and they shared
Yeah.
that, so I'm sure there was a traffic study done with that development, most likely, and my guess is, not having seen that study or remembering it, they probably said most of the traffic would be going
Up to 152.
to, versus
Well, I know,
125.
I know the.
Maybe not, but I've seen that happen where, in
Yeah.
Rochester, for example, they'll say, oh, the traffic's, I'll go, 90% of traffic's gonna turn left. And then it's like, actually, and then you find out, nope, it goes the other way.
I actually made a note, looking at the location of those roads and having to drive 125 south to go to Exeter every day and the traffic backup. I'm not surprised people would try to avoid that. And I don't know if it's something that we could implore Lee and Epping to, or actually it's the state, I suppose, 125, but maybe that's part of the problem, is that if they can figure out that corridor, people aren't going to be as likely to want to take a dirt road in Nottingham, and they would take 156 to Raymond and down, or go up to 152. So maybe the root cause isn't in our town, and it's somewhere exterior to us.
And the town is looking at traffic counts, obtaining traffic counts along Port Farm, Ledge Farm, and some of the other roads that were talked about the other night. So we'll have some data at least, and could be compared against the original traffic study, just to find out the difference.
Part of Ledge Farm was paved by the developer.
Yeah.
This might sound like a crazy idea, but when a road that was not paved before is now paved, obviously it allows for more speed. Why can't speed bumps be incorporated into the construction, into the hot topping of the road to control the speed? If those roads are basically for local people and you don't want cross-traffic, isn't that gonna discourage the cross-traffic?
The pushback so far, when I brought that up, when my road was paved, it was, road agent, and then it had to be done right to make sure they don't impact our, negatively impact our fire response too. So like, I know now it does to do with tables versus, speed
Well-
tables versus whatever, but if the.
Like in Rochester, in front of Home Depot, the speed bumps are low and they're spaced way apart, but it still definitely controls the amount of people that use that for cross-traffic, and it also controls the amount of speed on that strip. That road is parallel to North Main Street.
Yeah, they have those in Durham too, speed tables on Manbury Road going out of town.
Just a food for thought, if we're really talking about how we're gonna plan for the future.
Yeah, it's a proven traffic calming measure, for sure, but they need to be done right.
Well, everything needs to be done right. And if you're gonna pave the road, that will be the time to do it right.
Exactly.
And, you know, it is a point with these roads, and we're talking about off-site mitigation. This is some developer that volunteered, it wasn't a requirement to pave Ledge Farm, because he felt it would make his lots more marketable. But that's something that we could request or have as a part of our mitigation, that, you know, a new development is contributing that many more vehicle trips, therefore it's increasing the maintenance of a gravel road. It would deteriorate a lot quicker than, you know, that could be a part of the approval.
Was it just offered, or was it partially required because it would?
The minutes state, when this planning board approved Rocky Hill development, people on Ledge Farm Road asked for off-site improvements, and this planning board said no.
No, I mean,
So the hot topping, well after the approval, when he was constructing the road, he approached myself and Johnny, the developer did, and says, hey, look, just like Dirk says, you build the base coat, I'll hot top it for you when I hot top Rocky Hill, makes my project more manageable, more marketable. So, and we brought it to the selectmen, and it was a no-brainer. It was on the schedule to be paved, part of it anyway, so.
I know that at the roads workshop that I went to, it was with Mike Russo, the state was saying that you can figure 10 trips per household extra on any road. For every new house you put in, there'll be 10 trips per day on that road.
From one house.
From one house. So, that is something that I think, as a board, we really do need to keep in our mind when we start approving any of these bigger developments, and looking at what routes are people gonna be taking as they're making those trips to get back and forth to their home.
Anything else?
No, we got our work cut out for us.
Paul? Yes.
We've got two subdivisions that went, potential subdivisions that went before the zoning board and got approval last week. So we haven't received the subdivision applications yet. We've had many discussions by phone and email with a party out of Vermont that's interested in buying a lot on Route 4 for a commercial venture. I met with some other people today that looking at a different lot on Route 4 for a commercial venture, farm stand / craft store type of thing. And then Joanne and I are meeting tomorrow, right? Yeah, with another person that, it's the house on McDaniels Road. It's the only one on McDaniels Road in Nottingham, looking open, a commercial dental there, so we're meeting with them for the first time tomorrow, so.
Where's McDaniels Road, Paul?
They wanna open up a wedding venue.
No, where?
McDaniels Road is across from Smoke Street. Go across Route 4, that's McDaniels Road. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Some people call it Hall Street, and Barrington calls it something. Yeah. It's that
I know.
little farmhouse right on the road.
Okay, great.
That's it.
It's not gonna happen.
People here.
Minutes?
They're not here to comment.
You never
They-
know.
they
You
already-
never know.
Public comment. that's
So
it.
there is a public comment period that anybody in the public who is here can make any comment they would like. Reasonable, professional, appropriate.
The one time we have people and
See?
you don't ask for comment.
Yeah, they stayed the whole time.
I was just thinking, you guys stayed, that's really good.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no comments at this moment from the public, we will move on to approving the minutes.
I would suggest you do that since there's so many changes since.
Yeah, we,
Okay.
we're,
We'll push it to next
the
meeting.
last changes were given to us at 3:30 this afternoon, and Joanna doesn't work
that.
on Wednesdays. Gee, I wonder who that was. So,
All right, so we'll push that to the next meeting. With that,
Move to adjourn?
Second?
motion and a second, we're adjourned.
that spreadsheet, I'll get to both you guys.